Hello and welcome to Super Great Kids Stories. Wise tales from storytellers around the world, which will make you laugh and sometimes cry. Recommended for ages 5 to 105. I'm Kim and I love stories. Hello, Super Great Kids, and how are you? I hope you're having a good summer with lots of splashing around in water and maybe even taking time to tell a story or two. I've enjoyed watching the Olympic Games in France. It's exciting seeing gymnasts flying through the air and people racing on bikes and in canoes. This week's story is all about a canoe race. It's a thought-provoking legend from the Marshall Islands, a chain of islands in the Pacific Ocean which lie between Hawaii and the Philippines. The storyteller is Marian Leaper from Cambridge in the UK, and she's told stories since she was 6 years old, and now she tells them at festivals and museums and libraries. Marian also helps to organise a storytelling festival in East Anglia in the UK every year. Hats off to her, that's a busy job. Just before we hear from Marian, I've got a question for you. If you were taking part in the Olympics, just supposing, what sport would you choose? Would you be a gymnast flying high on bars, or would you race on a BMX bike, or in a canoe, or maybe in a swimming pool? Have a little think about that while we have a quick word with the grown-ups. Ready? Off you go. Hello, Super Great Kids, I'm back. Did you decide which sport you might like to try if you were taking part in the Olympics? Did you choose a team sport like basketball or soccer? Or would you prefer to go it alone, cycling or running or canoeing? I think I'd like to be able to run faster than the wind itself, and then I'd never have to wait for a bus or a train ever again. And I could visit my friends super fast without polluting the planet. Now, enough of that whiffle waffle. It's time to meet our storyteller, who is new to Super Great Kids Stories and who travelled from her home in the town of Cambridge to record some stories for us at Wardour Studios in London. So, let's give a very warm welcome to Marian Leaper.
Hello, my name's Marian, and I live in Cambridge, which is the flattest part of England. And in Cambridge, there's a place I love to go, which is a museum. With a long name, it's called the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. And I love going there because I'm a storyteller, and that museum is stuffed full of stories. In that museum, there are drums that have to be in separate cases because they quarrel, and there's a story about that. There are bones and feathers and stones and spears and arrows and babies' cradles, and each one of them has got a story attached. And there's a star map made out of bamboo and shells, and there's a beautiful cloth made out of pandanus leaves, and there's an enormous canoe. And all those things come in the story I'm going to tell you today, which I first heard in that museum. And it comes from halfway across the world from me, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And it's the story of the canoe race. So, imagine that you're standing on a little island, glowing like an emerald, like a jewel, in a huge ocean. An ocean that stretches so far in every direction, it almost meets the sky. And imagine you're standing on that island looking up at the night sky full of stars. And the people in the Marshall Islands, where this story comes from, they say that if you look carefully at that sky, you might just see Sky Mother. Sky Mother looking out of the sky with her wise eyes. And they say that at the beginning of time, Sky Mother, she brought up her 10 sons on one of those little islands in the ocean. Sky Mother, she built a hut, and she thatched it with the glossy green pandanus leaves. And she sat in that hut, and she wove fabrics and cloth, and while she did that, she watched those sons of hers growing up. They'd totter and tumble in the edge of the ocean, they'd splash and they'd jump, and they'd dive and they'd swim and they'd run. And when they were old enough, each of them got their own canoe. Imagine that, their own canoe and their own paddle, and they went all around the edge of that island. And they knew all the best places to play, the best places to fish and to swim and to hide. They knew the ways of the sea, they knew everything, or so they thought. But by the time those boys were young men, things had changed in that island. The seawater had risen, and the salt poisoned the land. And so the crops didn't grow. Those boys, they couldn't go and pick breadfruits off the trees anymore because they'd all shriveled away to nothing. And if they wanted to get water, they had to go to the furthest away spring right up at the top of the island. And the people of that island, they knew that soon they wouldn't be able to live on that island any longer. They knew they'd have to leave and find another home. Well, that's a big thing to do, and they'd need a leader. But who would they choose? Well, I tell you what, any one of Sky Mother's 10 sons would have made a good leader. But those young men, they couldn't agree. I'm afraid they quarrelled, and they argued, and they all said they should have a turn. And Timor, the oldest, he said, "Me, I'm the cleverest, I'm the strongest, I'm the oldest. You should respect the oldest, so I should be the leader." But nobody else agreed with him. And they all started shouting and yelling all together, except for the youngest brother. His name was Jabro, and he just watched them and listened. Well, in the end, someone said, "Well, if we can't agree, we must have a competition, and the person who wins that competition will be the leader." And so they agreed. And they went to tell Sky Mother. And Sky Mother said, a competition. Well, how about a race? How about a canoe race? You see that little island far away on the horizon, almost at the place where the sea meets the land in the sky? Why don't you race there? And then the winner will be the leader of the people. Well, so they all agreed. And I tell you what, they spent ages getting ready. They were polishing their canoe inside and out. They were carving themselves each a new paddle with beautiful patterns on it. They were oiling their bodies and putting up their hair in a warrior's top knot. Well, Jabro didn't do that because he was too young. He had his hair down by his shoulders. But all the rest did, and all the time they were doing that, Sky Mother was busy in that hut. She was weaving and making, and they didn't quite know what she was up to. But at last, the day came, and they were all ready in all the canoes. They were lined up on the beach in order, from the oldest to the youngest. And just as they were ready to start, Sky Mother appeared. And she was carrying this huge bundle. She was almost bent double under the weight of it. And she walked across the beach really slowly until she came to her son, her oldest son, Timor. And she said, "Timor, I would like to join in this race. Will you take me in your canoe?" Well, Timor, he looked at his mother and he looked at that huge, heavy bundle and he said, "Mother, if I take you in my canoe, you'll slow me down. I'll never win the race. What are you thinking of? Of course I can't take you." So she went to the next son and she asked him. And he looked at his hands, and he looked up in the sky, and he looked down on the ground anywhere except at Sky Mother, and then he said, "No, Sky Mother, sorry, I can't take you." She asked each of her sons in turn, and guess what? Each one of them said no, until at last she came to her youngest son, Jabro. And she said, "Jabro, will you take me?" And Jabro, he looked at his mother, at her wise eyes so full of love, and he said, "Come on, Mother, get in." And so she did. And then the race was started, and they were off, and the 9 older brothers, they pushed their canoes lightly into the water, and they started skimming across the surface of the water, paddling so fast. But poor old Jabro, it was pretty hard work to push that canoe into the water with his mother and the heavy bundle inside it. And it was hard to force the paddle through the water. And all the while, Sky Mother was undoing the bundle she was carrying. There was a great cloth shaped like a triangle, and there were ropes and blocks and bits of wood and 2 great poles. And Sky Mother fitted them together and showed Jabro how to fit them upright in the canoe and tie them with the ropes and the blocks. And then she showed him that great triangle cloth, and it was the first sail that had ever been invented. And she showed Jabro how to hoist it on the mast and how to tie it to the blocks, and she showed him how to turn the sail so it caught the wind. And Jabro, he started to fly across the water. He overtook one brother and the next, until suddenly there was the island in front of him. And when finally his other brothers caught up with him, they found Jabro standing on the shore of the island, with his hair put up by his mother in a warrior's topknot, and a leader's garland of flowers around his neck. He was the winner of the race, and he became the leader of the people. And he was a wise leader as well. He took his people safely to their new home, and he looked after them. And you know, they say in the Marshall Islands that when the time came for Sky Mother to go back to the sky, why, she took her 10 sons with her, and you can still see them there. There's a constellation that we call the Pleiades, but the people of the Marshall Islands call it the 10 Brothers. And the 2 brightest stars in that constellation, they call the eyes of Jabro. And Jabro, well, he's still watching over his people, because the Marshall Islanders know that when the Pleiades are in the sky, then the weather will be fine and the fishing will be good. And that's the story of the canoe race. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Marion, for sharing that story. I'm glad Jabro was rewarded for letting his clever Sky Mother travel with him in the canoe. Do you think you'd have said yes if your mum wanted to come with you in an important boat race? Choosing a leader by putting them all in canoes and seeing who paddles the fastest. Is that a good idea? See what your grown-ups think about that one. That story made me want to visit the Marshall Islands. More facts about them in this week's Story Owl Letters for Owlets. And now, it's time to dig into my bag of happies and say hello to some owlets who've recently flopped into our nest. Hello to Luca from Seattle in Washington in the US, who is 6.5 and has been listening to Super Great Kids stories since he was 4. His favourite story is The Griffin. He enjoys listening to Super Great Kids stories in the car on the way to school on Fridays, which has become one of his favourite rituals. Hurrah! And a hello hoot to new owlet Olivia from Richmond in Virginia in the US. Olivia is 6 and particularly likes Baba Yaga and the scary stories. Her mum sometimes pretends to be Baba Yaga, chasing her and threatening to eat her for breakfast. Eek! I hope you enjoy the new scary stories now that you're an owlet, Olivia. And let's fly up to Plymouth in Massachusetts to say hello to owlets Aaliyah, who is 7, and Aubrey, who is 3. Aaliyah's favourite story is Water Mama, and Aubrey loves stories about dragons. Hurrah! Dragons and mermaids are just brilliant. And across to the west coast of the US next, to Santa Cruz in California, to say hello to super great fan Ronan, who is 7. His favourite stories are Hey Ho and all of the super great scary stories. Across to the UK now to say hello to new owlets from Uckfield in East Sussex. Molly, who is 10, and Astrid, who is 7. They're big fans of storyteller Kate Corkery, and the whole family enjoy listening to Eggshell Soup. And Astrid is a big fan of Frau Holler, the witch who lives down a well. And hello now to owlet Mika, who recently turned 6. Mika lives in Colston in Surrey, and her favourite stories are Baba Yaga's Breakfast and Misery. She's been listening to Super Great Kids stories since she was 3. That's some going, Mika. I reckon that makes you a super great stories fan. A big shout out next to new owlets 8-year-old Ayla and her 4-year-old brother Jack, and also to Grandma Mimi, who bought Ayla an owlet subscription for her birthday. She's been listening since she was 4, and now her brother Jack listens too. Welcome to the club, both of you, and thanks very much to Mimi for supporting our storytellers. And up to Portland in Oregon in the US next to say hello to owlet Johanna, who is 4. She's discovered the podcast recently and has listened to many stories in the car and on the plane with Gigi and Papa. Her favourite story is Jack and the Two-Headed Giant. And Mum Ashley's favourite story is Stick Woman, told by Toop. And let's head down to Southern California next to say ooh, to 7-year-old Leland, who loves the legend from New Zealand, How Maui Slowed the Sun. Good choice, Leland. And staying in California, let's say hello to Jude Eves. Jude is turning 5 on August the 14th and asked to be an owlet for his birthday. Jude loves all the stories and likes to listen with his mum and his big sister Goldie May. Hello to the 2 of you, and hope you have a happy day, Jude Eves. That's it for Owlet Hellos this week. More welcomes next week. And thanks very much to all of you owlets who continue to support our podcast. If you'd like to support us on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon, we'll say hello to you on the programme. You can hear our stories advert-free, and you'll get access to our Super Great Kids Stories Express, which is great for long journeys, listening to back-to-back stories with much shorter introductions. And you'll have access to over 40 bonus stories and at least 24 super great scary stories. And there are so many good pictures being sent into our Facebook page at the moment. It's really hard to choose, but our pick of the week pictures are a brilliant drawing of a Nancy sipping his hot pepper soup to try to win the king's treasure, which is drawn by Ben from Beaverton in Oregon in the US. Really imaginative to draw the castle round the edge of your drawing and put the king with his hands on his hips looking on in disbelief as the hot pepper soup bowl is emptied. Very well done, Ben. And 8-year-old Xander from Pennsylvania in the US listens to Super Great Kids stories in the car with his dad. And he's drawn a very well-observed picture of the story How Maui Slowed the Sun, with powerful Maui harnessing the sun with magic woven ropes. Well done, Xander. Great attention to detail there. If you'd like to see these super great pics and lots more, go to facebook.com/supergreatkidsstories. Happy holidays! And if you happen to be out at night and looking up at the stars, remember to look out for Sky Mother and her 10 suns shining down at you. This podcast was produced at Wardour Studios in fabulous Fitzrovia in London.